Hi, I'm Meta Spencer. Today, let's go to Oregon, shall we? I haven't been to Oregon in a long time, and I want to meet some folks who live not in Portland or one of the big metropolitan areas, but out in the country, sort of. And they are big time peace activists and big time fervent Rotarians, I believe. And so we're going to get acquainted today. My first guest is Kathy Fritornik, with whom I became slightly acquainted through my friend Richard Denton, because Richard went off to Istanbul a couple of weeks ago and to a Rotarian powwow, and came back talking about how Kathy Fritornik was such a great speaker. I should get her on my show. So yesterday we had a brief get acquainted session, but I have not until just a few minutes ago met her friend, who is Mike Caruso.
Yes.
Or Mike Caruso. And Mike, I gather, is we're in your own home, not Kathy's home, right? We're using
Right.
your computer. Good. Okay. And you are someplace between Portland and Salem, Oregon. Is that what you
Correct.
said?
Yeah.
Okay. Very
Portland's
good.
the largest city and Salem's the state capital.
Mhm.
And we're about
And you are both interested in the relationship between militarism and the environment. Am I correct?
correct.
That's correct.
All right. Now then, I'm going to switch to Kathy, and Mike, you chime in because this is all completely unrehearsed, obviously. And you chime in whenever you have something to add or correct. And I'm going to ask Kathy to give me a little bit of the, I don't want to see a whole bunch of, a whole lot of slides, but I understand you gave a dynamite talk in Istanbul, and maybe you could give a kind of an ad lib a version of what you were sharing with the Rotarians from all around the world. And if you want to show a slide or two here or there, be my guest.
Okay. So basically what I was attending was the International President's Rotary Peace Conference. And those who were in attendance were I would say some of the leaders of the peace movement and the climate change movement in many, many different countries. And there were over 1,000 in attendance, and it was quite dynamic. What was very clear is that the people who were in attendance believed very strongly in the relationship between militarization and climate change and peace, and that climate change and peace are very intertwined. And so my talk was on the nexus between climate change and the growing militarization globally. So that's where my focus was.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's just not enough research, at least not enough being published on that topic, because I've looked around trying to find speakers before, and it's not easy to find folks like that. So it's good to know that that's your bag. I understand you were trained at MIT and then moved west and stayed. Is that right?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct. And I also am part of a committee for my class on environment and risk. And we produce webinars on climate change. And we do that a couple times a year.
Okay, what are we looking at here?
So what I wanted to bring out first is that we invest and continue to invest pretty heavily as around the globe in our military. And this is based on the information from the Institute for Economics and Peace, and also Watson Institute and a number of other think tanks. And our global investment in military, if we were to assume a world population of 8 billion people, comes to about $300 per person. And that is much larger than our combined investment in both climate and in peace. And you can kind of see the difference here in the in this particular slide. And then another slide I just wanted to show you that I think will get things off to another start is this one. And if you take a look at the slide, the graph on the right, and this was a part of a United Nations report, and the majority of the data also came from a couple of think tanks that I delve into. But what it's doing is comparing the cumulative amount of greenhouse gases from those militaries that report on greenhouse gases, which are not compulsory. So it's only a few of the militaries in the world, and it's only based on the procurement of fuel for the military. It has no other greenhouse gas reporting, and mainly because that's the low-hanging fruit. And if all the global militaries were combined and their greenhouse gases emissions combined, they would right now be fourth in the world compared to India, United States, and China in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And if we combined, and this is just pure speculation, all of their emissions, they would undoubtedly be probably displacing the United States. There's a huge correlation between the military operations as well as their contribution to climate change.
Okay, now hold on. I'm puzzled by the extraordinary position of China. Now you say this is not their overall military emissions, but just fuel. What is China doing that uses so much fuel then?
Well, they are expanding. Well, I'll first divide war into pre-war, the actual war, and post-war. So when you take a look at all three of those, China is expanding its military bases considerably, and it's building up its military substantially in terms of combat ready. And a lot of the other work that they're doing is trying to make sure that they have the cutting edge of a lot of military operations, and they have a large population, so there's a lot of investment there. So China is leading the world in terms of just their footprint on military, and they probably do a better job at reporting, is what I'm gathering as well. In the United States, especially, there is the policy of exceptionalism. So if there's a military objective by where there usually is when it comes to the military, they do not have to comply with a lot of the regulations. So even though they may have a requirement to report, they don't have to. So a lot of this is just based on what is the low-hanging fruit.
So that is true in general, though, isn't it? All of the agreements made at places like in the Paris Accords and so on have an exception for military expenditures or emissions. It's not just the U.S. that's allowing the military to fudge the figures or disguise their part in the contribution of emissions. Am I correct?
Well, I think it's more by omission than by misinformation. I think that a lot of the military simply does not report. And a lot of this information also was the low-hanging fruit that was obtained from think tanks like the Watson Institute. So this may have been a report to the United Nations, but the contributors also to understanding better about greenhouse gas emissions come from some of the think tanks, like the Watson Institute and the Swedish Institute. They're diving into the public records to try to corroborate what's in there.
Well, would you guess that if we had a more accurate report from the U.S., that it would be more similar to China? I'm only guessing because it's hard for me to imagine that a country that is not really doing military aggression anywhere in the world outside is emitting that much carbon in comparison to a country like the U.S., which has bases all over the world and is helping vicariously, if it were, or surreptitiously helping friendly countries fight real bloody wars. I mean, I'm not going into details there. I wouldn't be able to substantiate that, but I think the U.S. is more engaged militarily around the world than China, and so I'm astonished that the Chinese bar there looks so much higher.
Well, one of the things to recognize is during pre-war, because we're not in an obvious aggressive nature right now, we have a lot of military bases. The U.S. has about 1,000 military bases around the world, and other countries like India and China and Russia are trying to catch up. So they're starting to build a number of military bases that were not there before, and so that's part of it. And there is a lot of procurement for those military bases, and it isn't just simply for the barracks and but it is actually for the equipment, because a lot of the military bases are training grounds for certain types of equipment. And they also have huge populations that are there, and those are all part of the not only the training ground for new equipment, but also training ground for a lot of the personnel. So this is base camp for a lot of them, and those are contributors to this. And China is trying to catch up to the United States, as is India.
What's this colored bar? I see it says militaries, whereas the rest of the bars here have names of countries. Is this kind of an overall average that you put in there, or what does that colored bar represent?
This is this is an overall average from all of the militaries. Yeah, it's pretty significant, and I don't think a lot of people realize that contribution from the military alone.
Still, it's hard for me to even see how that's an average of the whole thing. Now, with China up so high and the U.S. almost as high, halfway as high, I would have thought the average would look closer to, sort of above where it is. But anyway, here I am quibbling. Tell me more. That's probably all we need to see of your slide now. But
so we're seeing overall a very continued increase in military expenditures globally. A lot of this happens to be more, it's escalating more recently. And what we're also seeing is the decrease in personnel. And so we're not getting globally as many enlistees in militaries that are part of the country or part of the state. And so what that is indicating is that there's a higher percentage now going into weaponry, development of weaponry, and very sophisticated weaponry. And so we're seeing a lot of expenditures.
Excuse me, are you saying that you're distinguishing between weaponry and personnel? Is that?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
And a lot of this information is also coming from some of the think tanks, but I also pulled some of the information from military magazines and military websites. And what we're seeing a lot of is additional weaponry that can go farther, more sophisticated, that can also be more lethal. So by more lethal, I mean killing larger numbers of people.
Okay, you're going to have to explain both of these charts because I don't know what they are.
Okay, the first chart is showing the global military expenditure for from 1995 to 2022. And the purpose I put this in here is that it's increasing, and it's continuing to increase even in 23 and 24. And then the personnel rate that you're looking at on the right side is that, and it is from 1960 to 2016, and it's more than halved since 1960. So the personnel rate is going down, and there are a lot of reasons for that. One of them is that there are few people willing to enlist. In the United States, we don't have a draft, so it's based on voluntary enlistment. And in other countries as well, except for places like Russia and other places that require have requirements for men of certain age to enlist. But we're seeing fewer personnel. So if you're going to have a military expenditure that's going to continue to increase, the only other place that it would really be going to is to armament.
Well, this gives me this interesting image of two armies going into battle with no personnel. They simply send out each one sends out a battalion of robots, and each army tries to kill the other's robots and win the war. And I think that's if we're going to have a war, let's do it that way.
Well, that's very true. We've got artificial intelligence, AI, that is very much part of some of the new weaponry that we're seeing. Take a look at the drones. A few years ago, drones were kind of an oddity, but they actually have been used in the last decade pretty extensively by the Army, and they've been growing very sophisticated. It's a plug and play. You can put in somebody's address, and that drone can go to that address and be armed and cause harm.
No kidding. Wow. I hadn't heard that. Wow.
Yeah.
I
And
hear the Ukrainian drones are really excellent.
they're extremely accurate, and so are the Russian drones. And the Russian drones have been using a lot of their drones for attacking civilians in Ukraine, and some of them are unfortunately very good at what they do. And
Well, yeah, but not equally good, as I understand. I can't remember where I saw this, but it was a video a couple of days ago that said that the Ukrainians sent about 100 drones to Moscow, and about 30% of them got through, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe the 30% were shot down. I don't know. Point is that they got, some of them made it and some didn't. But as I understand it, the Russians, when they send drones to Kiev, they get knocked down much more. Almost all of them get intercepted.
yeah, some of them do. Some of them get through. In addition to the drones, we're using a lot of AI robots. We're developing them to be more sophisticated. And probably maybe a decade ago, there was some research being done at a number of institutions on the capacity of our soldiers to be able to carry heavy packs in all different types of environmental conditions, especially as we're experiencing high heat due to climate change in some areas. And those, if you fast forward to now, what those robots are doing is actually replacing supplementing our soldiers so that they're the ones who carry the heavy artillery and the packs, and then they are manned by soldiers to actually just make decisions about which are their targets. And ultimately, I can see that these would be autonomous drones, autonomous robots, where they make their own decisions. But right now, they're the ones who are doing the heavy lifting, a lot of the heavy lifting.
Do they use those dogs? I've seen images of robot dogs that were really good at carrying stuff. And I don't know whether the military is using that to have them carry heavy loads for the soldiers or not.
Yeah, they come in different forms, and I've seen the robot dogs, and I've seen them also be equipped with sensors to detect IEDs, so that they go in front of the combat soldiers, and they're able to detect, is there an explosive device nearby? So they use them for multiple purposes.
Well, also you see that the number of military personnel has gone down, so the rate of mortality rate in the militaries has gone down, but the civilian rate has just gone up exponentially, and it looks like it's going to continue to do so.
So I had mentioned that war impacts the environment, and a lot of us don't think about the pre-war portions of it. And this is actually a globe, and those little blue dots are where military bases are located. And this came from a site called World Beyond War. I apologize.
Oh, and these are little dots here on the left. On that.
That's right.
Okay.
So all those blue dots, they actually show where military bases are located. And it's majority, yes, it's the United States, but there are also others as well. And so they're everywhere, all over the world. And their contributions to environmental destruction are huge. And being located in some areas where communities really haven't had a choice or haven't really been welcoming of some of these military bases, mainly because they use a lot of their natural resources like water, and it's not always plentiful. And
So
they also
let me try to figure out what I'm seeing. Here
Sure.
it looks like, is this Africa? And you've got military bases up there in Europe and then all around toward the east of Africa. Is that right?
Yes, but this is only half the globe.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a lot of bases. Oh boy, those are all American.
Yeah, most of them are. But yeah.
Oh, but it's all bases.
It's all the bases together.
Yeah, all countries. Okay.
But just to give you an idea, U.S. has over 1,000 bases around the world. I think India may have under 100. Most of them are under 500, the other countries, but they're trying to expand that. But the idea is that these are our bases, and they contribute to environmental degradation, and a lot of the weaponry contains a lot of high hazardous materials, and so when those are expended, they wind up in the ground, they wind up in the water, and they wind up with people after the base is closed or during the base's operation. Actually, the communities are the ones who have to do the cleanup. And then the next column, during war, what I have here are some of the sites in Ukraine. And at the top, you'll see this actually came from the UN. And this is an oil depot, a fuel depot. And what is, on one hand, pretty encouraging if you're in the war effort, if you hit this as a strategic target, because now you've destroyed or their ability to fuel their equipment. But on the other hand, you have had a huge impact on the environment around it, because that oil is now going to seep into the groundwater and go and potentially find its way to a stream. And those could be destroying the water supply for that particular community. So,
but it's not just the fuel being used for the weaponry, but it's also part of a strategy of undermining the enemy's economy. And that's especially the case for Russia, because
right.
Russia's great source of wealth is oil and gas. And the Ukrainians have lately been targeting their refineries. And just a couple of days ago, they hit the largest Russian refinery. And of course, you know, it's in a way, it's not going to kill as many people, but so you think it will as a target, in a kind of logical way, that's a more sensible thing than destroying people's homes or businesses, you know, where they're working. But really, the effects of the on the environment of all the blown up hydrocarbons is no doubt really awful.
So, the bottom picture is showing the destruction of the forest, and that is unfortunate because that was one of the preserves in Ukraine for some of their more endangered species. But in war, it doesn't matter our biodiversity, whatever is a reasonable attack, trying to ferret out some of the enemy troops is fair game. And then after war, I'll drop down to the bottom picture. It's not that all these chemicals just go away after time. This is a picture in 2023 of Vietnam. And Vietnam is yet to recover, at least parts of Vietnam have yet to recover. And a lot of the children who are in Vietnam are still seeing the effects of some of the contaminants that were left from the war 50 years ago.
Is that Agent Orange or something else?
Agent Orange is predominant. Yeah, defoliants, the defoliant Agent Orange is very predominant. This is a slide that was taken in northern Alaska, and it's a representation. It is actually the actual slide that was taken from a satellite camera, showing a river system that used to be pristine. And it is, you see, part pristine and part orange. And with the melting of the tundra, what's happening is that irons and other heavy metals are entering these river systems. And this was first noticed actually in Russia. But what they're doing is it's all over the Arctic as the tundra melts. These river systems are collecting heavy metals as well as iron, and they are becoming very toxic. It's what we don't see. I mean, you and I are not up there in the tundra region right now, and most people aren't, very few are. But this is what our satellites are showing us, is that, and the people who live there, a lot of the indigenous populations are facing an inability to continue gathering their food source from water systems. And these river systems are going to be traveling downstream and reaching major populations of fish, and eventually affecting larger populations, not just those limited to the tundra.
Why is one river stream system it affected and the others not?
It just hasn't happened yet. The tundra is collapsing in different ways, and it depends on the ground underneath. It depends on exactly where the melting is occurring more rapidly. Share, and then I'm going to go back to share again.
Many Russians see these photos. You know, the point about I have some long-standing interest in Russia, but the Russians are, I don't know how to explain it, but you can't talk to them, very many of them, about climate change. The government doesn't want them to believe in it, because of course the economy depends on their fossil fuel exports and so on. But in addition, intelligent people that here would be with you in Rotary, or marching in the street with various environmental protests, in Russia are still saying, well, it looks to me like it's, the weather outside is fine, and so I don't believe there's such a thing as global warming.
Well, that's true in many ways. People do believe that my weather is okay today and it's just an anomaly, but unfortunately those adverse weather systems are happening with more frequency, and the numbers of dollars that go into trying to reestablish some of the communities that are destroyed are going from the millions of dollars, and now in the last 5 years have been the billions of dollars. and especially our site in North Carolina. It's been unfortunate, but they are, turning into very difficult impacts to the economy, especially the local economy. Ultimately,
Okay, now you're a Rotarian, and I have immense admiration for Rotarians, but I'm not one, so you're going to have to brief me on what the game plan is. Rotary people tend to really be supportive of peace issues. I'm not sure how much they are concerned at the movement or the whole global organization is concerned about climate issues or environmental issues. And I'm not sure how much they've tied them together. And least of all, do I understand whether there's any particular kind of campaign that you're supporting as ways or objectives to try to intervene and turn things around. What is going on in the world of Rotary to solve these problems? If you can give me a shorthand version.
well,
While she's doing that, I want to ask Mike what your part in all of this is. Are you engaged with some kind of Rotarian campaign?
Well, there's a number. One, which Kathy and I are both involved with, is called Ending War 101, which is a kind of a course, online course to basically educate people about the power of nonviolent conflict as opposed to violent conflict. So we have a QR code. It's a free course, and it has just an amazing list of resources, books, articles, videos. We partnered with World Beyond War. David Swanson is the founder of that. There are videos of Martin Luther King's Riverside speech against the Vietnam War, the 1960 talk by JFK on peace at American University. There's several debates that David Swanson has had with military personnel about the advantages of working to stop conflict without violence. And it's in 4 modules. And so that's one of the things we're working on.
So the Rotarians are putting on this training program, or what is how do you use the materials that World Beyond War has generated?
Well, we have quarterly webinars, and then we have an international convention coming up this year in Calgary in June.
Oh,
We're going to have a full day of that to educate Rotarians about what we're doing. And there's also Rotary has what's called Rotary Action Groups. There's a Rotary Action Group for Peace. There's a Rotary Action Group for Dentists. There's a Rotary Action Group for just about anything you can think of. There's also what's called SRAG, Environmental Science Rotary Action Group, which addresses the situation of how the planet is being degraded, and also addresses how war is a factor in that. So the Environmental Science Rotary Action Group and Rotary Action Group for Peace are very closely aligned, and they have a lot of events together too.
I'll just add to that, at the peace conference, yes, it was a peace conference, but I would say that over 50% of the presentations were that nexus between climate change and peace. And that Rotary is very closely aligned with the Institute for Economics and Peace, and they have a positive peace index, positive peace program. And what that means is that the best way to stop war is to prevent war. So let's look at the underlying circumstances that bring about war. And a lot of it has to do with, degradation of the environment, limited natural resources, people not having enough food, political instability. And so that's what a lot of our projects have looked at. And what was very evident in this conference was it's not enough. We have to look at the climate impacts. And to a person, every talk I heard also brought back the importance of how we address climate change. And it really made me feel that the US and Russia are so out of step with the rest of the world. We are very much in a climate crisis, and people around the world, other than in a couple countries, are actually trying to do things about it to make their countries more sustainable, to be able to mitigate for climate change. And so that conference really brought home the idea to me that Rotarians get it, and they understand that they have to address climate, because all the work we do on positive peace could all be undermined by one incredible drought or one incredible flood that just destroys a country's ability to produce food for its people. I put this slide up here for just to give you an idea of what we do. And Mike mentioned the peace building, Rotary Action Group for Peace, and also the environment. But we also, our areas of focus all center around these 7 areas: community development, basic education, and we have projects all over the world that do this. Do have, in one case, and underwater and water supply, we help rebuild a dam that had been destroyed. And under maternal and child health, we invest heavily into programs that are going to support women. And especially, we have one project in our club that's addressing violence against women in Nepal. And Mike can probably explain better than I can, but we also have developed, and I believe just concluded in working with the Nepalese government, an emergency system.
Yeah, 911 emergency system for which you put in after they had the horrific earthquake several years ago. Okay, the Environmental Sustainable Rotary Action Group and the Rotary Action Group for Peace have chapters all over, not just all over the U.S. and Canada, but all over the world, because we have a presence in over 200 countries and geographical areas. So we have a huge footprint. And we have a hugely active group in India, in Australia, and Japan, and South Korea, and just, anywhere you can imagine. So they're coordinating with each other. It's constant. I mean, we have, I don't know, someone told me we have over 1 million peace groups on the planet. We have, literally hundreds of chapters of peace and environmental sustainability. And the challenge is getting them to coordinate with each other. A lot of times you'll have 5 different chapters having meetings at the same time. So, and they're also very important and so very informative. So,
do you have meetings of chapters together, like, a chapter in Bombay meeting with a chapter in Peru?
Yeah, we have what's called inter-country committees.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a U.S.-Ukraine intercountry committee. We have a U.S.-India intercountry committee. So this is, and this is not set just to peace and the environment. It's to all of the areas of focus, which overall is peace. Anything you're doing to help humanity is fostering peace. So there's
one other thing about it is, do you reach out as much as my impression is that a lot of the organizations that I belong to are people getting together and talking to each other about very important issues and showing slides to each other, etc. But I'm much more interested in getting those slide images out and other activities going on in the general public, so that people who are not Rotarians and people who are not peace activists are exposed to them more. How much outreach are you doing as compared to sharing with your members?
Well, we're often told that Rotary is the best kept secret in the world. So it's a challenge. I mean, previously Rotary conventions where you get, Calgary's expected to have 25 to 30,000 people. Previously, these were just for Rotarians. You had to be involved in some aspect of Rotary. Now, anyone can apply and attend these conferences. That said, the outreach is still much more limited than we hope it would be. We need more. I don't know if it's social media or whatever, but getting the word out is a
Let me
challenge.
offer to help. When you have
Sure.
your meeting, was it June that you're having your Calgary International Conference?
Yes.
June. Okay. Well, help me set up some interviews and conversations with Rotarians that are there, and then help me spread these around to the world. I do my
Sure.
best to reach out through things like Substack or our website or YouTube, and try to get it out there past the borders of my little own personal network. And I think maybe I can do 3 or 4 interviews and conversations with people that you help me identify in the Calgary meeting. Is that a deal?
Certainly, certainly. We could then put you in contact with Rotarians like, well, Richard Denton. He's talking to Sir Douglas Roach about attending the convention in Calgary. There's a woman in Portland who is a Rotary Peace Fellow, she has Rotary sponsored her for a master's degree in peace and conflict resolution. She's from Palestine. She tells her story of what it was like to grow up in Palestine and what those people are going through, which, in this country, the media is so biased against Palestinians. So we feel it's important to get her message out. And so we're doing that. We're inviting the public to these presentations and so on and so forth.
Hey, Kathy, tell me a little bit more. You say that there were lots of presentations in Istanbul about climate and peace or militarism. What did you learn there? Did you did you meet some folks that you didn't know about before? And can you give me an impression of where there's some action on this issue? Are there people doing research that I haven't been able to find as many as I think there may be in the world? But so give me kind of a summary of what I might have seen if I'd been with you.
Well, I think there are a couple of things. There are some very nice presentations at the beginning in the general session, but where the real meat hit was in the breakout sessions. These are the people that were the boots on the ground, the people that were either had suffered or told their story. We had one young man from Rwanda, and I will remember this story forever. Here is a man who, when he was a young boy, saw his entire family massacred, and he was able to hide. And now he's grown up and he has his own family. And he talked about his story about, in order for him to be able to deal with his past, he had to deal with the present, and he had to go and talk to the people who killed their family, his parents, his brothers, his sisters. He had to find peace within himself. And in order to do that, he had to find out why. Why did you do this? And even as I sit here, I think about him and his story, and it just sends chills. But there were a lot of stories like that. There was a story about Cyprus, and for generations, the Greeks and the Turks have, just kind of rattled their swords at each other, fought each other, and they've been brought up with a hatred towards each other. And that is just so generational in its legacy, and it makes no sense whatsoever. But there is a group of people that are working very, very much with the Cypriots who are Cypriots themselves to bring down that boundary. It's an artificial boundary, and it needs to stop. People need to start working together, and they're being successful at it. So that's where I think the beauty, the importance of this conference is learning how people can face all odds and still come out with a joy to keep moving forward and to continue in their search for not just peace, but also recognizing what's going on in the environment around them. And the other part, I think all of us around the world, especially in the United States, should take a listen to, is how intertwined our climate change and our impacts of adverse weather are affecting not just ourselves and our community and our countries, but it's also affecting our economies. So those are some of the takeaways, and I felt like I was in a different world.
Can you talk about the climate breakout groups, Kathy?
Yes, what we heard a great deal of in terms of climate was a lot of the destruction of some of the crops, the flooding, unexpected. There were no safe havens. We listened to about sea level rise and how it's impacting a lot of the island communities. And there were also stories about how some of the success stories. So a lot of the technologies and were shared, but a lot of it, I hate to say, was focused also on mass migration out of some of these countries where people are truly suffering from lack of food because of droughts and suffering from losing everything. How do you lose everything? Everything you've ever owned because of a flood. And then you have to find another place to go to. And we talked a lot about the children. And it wasn't just about the children in war, it was about the children who have to leave their homes because they are part of all of this. And, as parents, we're supposed to be doing the best for our kids and their future. And a lot of the people there just had to move on. In our panel on the nexus between climate and war was a man who as a young person, had to leave Iraq, and he told a very gripping story about having been forced out, and they lived in fear before they were forced out, only because he was at some point in his ancestry, he had some Iranian in him, and that was not accepted in Iraq at the time, and their family fled and they came to the United States, and he had to rebuild. Very compelling stories from people who were forced to flee their countries. And who wants to leave their country? This is where their families are located. This is where their children have been raised, and now they have to pack up and go to an unknown. It's a very uncertain future.
I see your focus is largely on the environment and the impact of the military on the environment. I certainly want to know more, to be more in touch with people working on that area, but especially, of course, on climate, because it's not really easy, from my point of view, to tie the climate and the military together. It's very, you have to work hard to show the relationship or the interaction. Do you have a particular handle on that, either of you? Mike, do you participate in anything that tries to show that these factors, the climate and military expenditures and so on, and military action, and the military emission of carbon and so on, are important to address together?
Well, yeah, they're hand in hand. I mean, the military is in the process, in my opinion, of destroying the planet. I mean, it's not the only factor, but it's a huge factor. And as Kathy showed in her slides, that it's not just during the act of the aggression of the war or whatever it is. It's the after effect. It's so cumulative. You got the environment warming up, and then you saw what's happening in the Arctic, and it needs to be addressed. And one of the speakers at the Istanbul conference was Kumi Naidu, who is the past executive director of Greenpeace, and I wasn't able to attend, but to my mind, he's one of the world leaders on the climate and what we can do.
Sorry, did you go to Istanbul also?
I wanted to, but no, I was undergoing some chemotherapy at the time, and my doctor said, if you do, you better get some trip insurance. And I took that to mean I better not. I will be going to Calgary. I finished the chemo.
You go to the Calgary one. That's not too onerous. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So now, do you belong to the same Rotary organization?
Yeah, we're actually in the same Rotary Club. There's
How many people are there in your group, and what are some of the recent talks that you've heard people discussing? Like it's like once a week you have lunch together. Is that the idea?
Yeah, on Wednesdays at noon. So we have about 40 some people in our club. Kathy's our club secretary.
About 52 right now.
About 52.
And
We usually get attendance of around 25 to 35. All kinds of presentations. I think Altruistic Relief Kitchen was one of the most amazing programs that started in Alaska. Maybe you want to explain that?
Started in Homer, Alaska, and they go all over the world, and they can easily set up now a kitchen to feed people in need. And it could be in a war zone, it could be in a climate impacted area. And their success rate is a lot of it is based on their economy of scale. They can feed 500 people for under 1,000 people for under $1 a meal.
who can? What's the organization again?
Altruistic Relief Kitchen.
ARK. And they're out of Homer, Alaska. If you ever wanted to have a more compelling group to talk to, this is boots on the ground, effective, and they don't just leave. They train people in the community to carry on their work after they're done.
So they have established kitchens in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Turkey, in Mexico, and in the U.S. And it was founded by a homeless person. And he just figured out a way to get the cooking utensils. It's a phenomenal story that they have.
Well, armies travel on their stomachs. I understand. You got to take account of not only the army's stomach, but also the people around them, and that's a real problem. Well, you're doing wonderful work, and it's a real pleasure to meet you. And I hope we can stay in touch. And as we get closer to what's going to be June pretty soon, I can even now start organizing forums that could take place during the time when the conference was on in Calgary. I expect you're going to have many thousands of people. Is that right?
Yeah, there's 25 to 30,000.
Richard Denton wants me to try to get Martin Sheen.
That was our thought.
We tried.
Yeah, he's such an inspiring man. It's true. So I'll see if I can reach out. I tried years ago, but it didn't go anywhere. Anyway, we'll try. Okay, it's been fun, and I hope we do stay in touch, and that you continue your wonderful work. And it's just a pleasure to have a new friend, or two new friends.
It was a pleasure.
It's very much a pleasure. Thank you.
Carrie, Ellen, Kathy, and Mike. See you again. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.